Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my channel. My name's Madison and today I am going to talk about books that I loved when I was a kid. The first thing I want to say is that Harry Potter's not going to be on this list, and it's not because I don't love Harry Potter. You know I love Harry Potter. But I've already talked a lot about Harry Potter on this channel. I will put a video up there about my top 5 favorite books, and Harry Potter is on there. The second reason is that Harry Potter is the series that helped me fall in love with reading, but that statement in and of itself implies that there are other books, right? There are other loves. And those are the books that I'm going to talk about today. The first book I am actually going to talk about is The Giver. I think I read The Giver when I was in 6th grade, maybe. It was for a book report. I must have been told to read something other than, I don't know, fantasy maybe, and so I read The Giver, and it's this sci-fi dystopian kind of children's story, and it was wonderful. It was the first book that I'd ever read that was sci-fi or dystopian. It was the first book I'd ever read where I was just enthralled with this society that is so different from our own and different on purpose, which was fascinating to me. And then it was also the first book I read where I got to the end and I was like, wait, what happened? And that feeling of trying to figure it out and trying to decide what I thought was really exciting for me as, you know, a kid. And so that was the first time I read The Giver. I think I've read The Giver twice since then, and I do want to reread it. It's definitely a book that I recommend to like kids, 5th grade, middle school, but the younger they are, the more I would caveat the idea that there are some tough topics in this book, and just consider that before you give it to a kid. The next book I'm going to talk about is a series, the series of unfortunate events. Now, I'll caveat this by saying that I did not finish this series. I think I read the first 6 books, and I loved them. They were funny and witty, and I just loved the author. This was the first book where I really felt like the author was fantastic, and I would read anything that he wrote. I loved the characters, of course. They were fun, and the story was amusing and sad at the same time, and there was this mystery involved, and the Baudelaire children are always trying to figure out how to get out of the situations that they find themselves in or that they're put in. I did choose to not finish the series because my little, I don't know, probably 12-year-old self heard that the Baudelaire children were never going to find out what happened to their parents, and I said, well, that's dumb, and I stopped reading the series. I may go back and finish it eventually, but, you know, I was a kid, and I still kind of stand by that. It sounds like that would be a wholly unsatisfying ending, and that's not something I'm particularly interested in, but in general, those books are fantastic, and if you have a kid who likes wit and humor and is ready for language that is challenging, I think that the series of unfortunate events would be great for them. The next 2 books are by the same author, and they fall comfortably into the fantasy category that I loved as a kid, and that is, the first one is Enchanted, which is a Cinderella retelling. It was the first time I had ever read anything like that was like a fantasy, or that was a fairy tale retold, and I loved it. I loved the adventure. I loved the conflict that the main character goes through because she is under a curse, and that curse is she has to do whatever anybody tells her. She has to follow all the orders. It was a lovely, lovely book, and there are ogres, and I didn't know how to read the word ogre, and then when I watched Shrek, that helped me a lot. But I just loved it as a fairy tale retelling. I had never read anything like that. That was the first time. The other one by this author, Carson Levine, was The Two Princesses of Bamar, which up until probably last year I called The Two Princesses of Bain-Marie because I don't know how to read. and I certainly didn't as a child. But the point is, The Two Princesses Princesses of Bamar is this story of two young princesses who are quite different, and I really enjoyed the fact that the two sisters were different. Not what you would expect from princesses. My little middle school self just thought that was awesome. And they go on adventures, and there are dragons and fairies, and there's a little love story, but not too much because it's not really about that. It's about the sisters. And I just loved it. Though Ella Enchanted and the Two Princesses of Bamar, other than Harry Potter, those are the big fantasy books that I really enjoyed. I read other books by this author when I was in middle school, but those two were my favorite. Also, you don't have to, like, they're fine for younger readers. I wasn't a strong reader when I was young, so I couldn't read these books when I was in 4th or 5th grade, but I think those are age appropriate. 4th and 5th graders would definitely enjoy these books. The next one I am going to talk about is the first historical fiction book that I read that I can remember, and I read it at 6th or 7th grade. It's called Fever 1793, and it is the story of a young girl in Philadelphia when yellow fever just ran through the country. I loved the historical fiction element of it. I loved going back in time and feeling like I was experiencing what this girl was experiencing. I mean, I think she even got to watch George Washington walk down the street, or probably ride down the street, because that is what they did. But it's a heartbreaking book, but it's also a story of a young girl learning how to be a hero, and I just loved it. The next book I also read in middle school, I think 8th grade, and it's also historical fiction. It is called The Witch of Blackbird Pond. This is a book about a woman, a girl who comes, I think, from the Caribbean up to New England in the colonial time period, and she doesn't understand the society that she's ventured into because it's so much more conservative than where she came from. And there's also, obviously, this woman who is ostracized from society, and she's called the Witch of Blackbird Pond, and the story is just about them. And I really enjoyed it. It's the second historical fiction book that I really remember loving, and those two books together, Fever 1793 and The Witch of Blackbird Pond, I think kicked off my love for historical fiction. The last book I'm going to talk about is The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Now, I think I read this probably in 8th or 9th grade, so, you know, a young teenager by this point. But these were the first books I remember reading that were realistic fiction, as realistic as, you know, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is. But they're funny, they're sweet, they deal with life, they deal with important topics that girls need to read about, and I loved them. Plus, it was a series, and I loved that too, and it was a series that I continued reading until the last book came out, and I think I was probably 20 by that point. Don't quote me on that. I'll do some Googling. Should have done that before I started talking, but it didn't happen. So, those are the books that I loved when I was a kid that I couldn't wait to talk to you guys about. Let me know if you have read these, what you thought about them, and what were your favorite books when you were a kid. Thanks, guys. I hope you all have a great day. Bye.